Anyone else?
This is Senate Appropriations, and we're continuing our work on the 23 budget adjustment. And this afternoon, we're hearing from the Vermont Judiciary regarding their budget request. And I see we have a number of people. I don't know who's going to be the primary. Oh, you are going to have the pleasure?
I was at least going to start it.
Okay, and then that's fine, Terry. You please sit down, and if you want other people to come up, fine. Otherwise, we'll just, as you speak, you put yourself on record if you want to add to anything Terry might have said or respond to a question. I'm going to, since you're new and your appointment has been before we started the session. So I'm going to go around and have the committee members introduce themselves.
Great.
Bob Sarah from Orleans County.
Jenny Lyons, Chittenden Southeast.
Senator.
Rich Wesley.
Hi, nice to see you.
Jane Kitchell, Caledonia, and of course Senator Sears is here physically at times, but he's on the screen today. But he needs no introduction to the judiciary.
Andrew Pertzler, Washington District.
And Senator Phil Baruth from Chittenden Central.
Nice to see you again.
And so Andy is our new vice chair, and so we're glad to have him come to the committee. And Senator Lyons is also asked to join us, and we're very happy about that. And we're happy that Chrissy is filling in. And yesterday I got a call saying you weren't sure you'd have the material 24 hours ahead. But I said that was fine.
Oh, thank you. Yes, we weren't able to because there was a network outage.
Well, I was answering the phone, and so I said, fine, just show up.
Oh.
So if you want to introduce who else is here with you, Tara, that'd be great.
Thank you so much for the record, Terry Porcello, State Court Administrator. We did then email materials later in the afternoon.
Yes, we all great.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And what we thought we would do, the invitation was to address the Budget Adjustment Act request as well as the fiscal year 24 budget. So we were planning to, if that's okay, kind of divide it half and half, starting with the Budget Adjustment Act. And with the Marcia Shells, who's the Technology and Innovation Chief of the Technology Services Center at the Judiciary, and Joe Paquin, who is also with Technology Services Center, and you know Greg Mosley, who's the Chief of the Finance and Administration for the Judiciary.
Other positions in state government as well.
Right, and Greg will be primarily addressing the fiscal year 24 budget request, and then Chief Superior Judge Thomas Zone will also be speaking if there are questions about certain aspects of the fiscal year 24 budget. So we wanted to have people here to answer whatever questions might arise for either budget requests.
Then we'll let you start, and I assume maybe we should work on this document here.
Yeah, I was actually, for the Budget Adjustment Act, I was going to speak to the court operations aspect of it, and then Marcia was going to speak to the technology aspects of it, and that would be more with respect to the slides that were prepared. Okay. So I
do want to do it.
Okay, great, thanks. We really are grateful for the opportunity to speak with you about our Budget Adjustment Act request. And it was our understanding with the budget guidance that one-time funding requests should be entered to the Budget Adjustment Act. So the Budget Adjustment Act request does involve one-time funding requests. The primary component of the request is for operating from the ADS network. And that's our primary concern and what we wanted to lay out for you. I mentioned Marcia will talk about the technology aspects, Greg the budget aspects, and me, and also on behalf of Judge Zone, the court operations aspects of it.
Well, let me say, one-time requests are not, you don't have to make them specific. We may say, well, that's fine, but we're gonna not try to squeeze it in the BAA. We'll give it the consideration it needs and deal with it in the context of the big bill. So we're kind of flexible in terms of, the nature of one-time funding, and don't feel that if it's not in the BAA that it's not out there for potential funding. It's just a matter of what we deal, and obviously policy we tend not to get into policy areas or a major decision, et cetera, within the BAA. It's more of a truing up of the budget and the assumptions that were, and estimates were used. So, so if you're saying, oh, well, if the House didn't put it in, that, and if you don't put it in, it's,
We've lost it.
you've lost it, that's not true.
Well, I really appreciate that explanation. I guess I wanted to just explain why we submitted it in the Budget Adjustment Act. It's for that reason, but thank you for explaining. And in fact, the House did pass out the Budget Adjustment Act today, and it did include the
Some
network.
of,
Right, and then reference the largest component of the request, which has to do with replacing the network. Basically, they asked, and this is in keeping with an executive agency protocol, that if it's any project in excess of $1 million, that an independent review be conducted. So they recommended that, and we started the process to do that accordingly.
they, meaning the House.
House Appropriations, Lisa Gavin in particular.
She works for joint fiscal. Okay.
Right, yes, have recommended that and has given, and in the Budget Adjustment Act bill that was passed, it speaks to the independent review, and we have started that
And
process.
I believe you and Senator Sears and Stephanie Barrett from joint fiscal
Yes.
actually had an earlier discussion around that particular proposal. And
Yes,
we asked Lisa to participate because she's sort of our technical resource.
she's been fantastic.
Oh,
She's
good.
been such a great resource and has helped us answer questions and proceed.
It's good to hear.
Yeah, but I guess from a court operations perspective, I just wanted to emphasize how issues with the current network have severely impacted our ability to conduct court hearings. It's presented, we've had 13 separate, now 14 actually, separate major outages since June of 22 alone. The situation had never been ideal, but it's gotten progressively worse. And that prompted our Technology Services Center to look at what can we do to make improvements and to make sure that we have reliable network service. So they started developing this plan many months ago, and then as kind of the situation has exacerbated, it's become more and more critical that we have something in place to address the problems that we've been experiencing. One of the, this has been, I guess, especially frustrating in terms of when the network goes down, the court's trying to address the backlogs. The backlog existed before the pandemic began, but it certainly has been exacerbated during the pandemic era. We had jury trials that were halted. We had severe restrictions on the capacity of courthouses, and that limited our ability to schedule court hearings. Court hearings are what move the dockets. When things get scheduled for, particularly in a criminal docket, if it's a jury trial, that's when cases settle, that's when cases move. So when we didn't have that movement, it really resulted in this backlog growing and growing. And the pivot to remote hearings during the pandemic. The remote hearings that actually, the pandemic was had a silver lining in that respect. Before the pandemic, our ability to conduct remote hearings was largely limited to a phone that might be on the bench and trying to reach people that connect by telephone. But because of the restrictions that prevented in-person attendance, that necessitated the need to implement remote hearings, the pandemic monies that the legislature allowed us to use really enabled us now to conduct remote hearings in every courtroom in the state. Every courtroom is now equipped with the large screens such as that, the laptops, the other equipment that's necessary so that people can now connect remotely, whether audio or video. So
That would
that's
certainly be good for individuals who have got to appear before court that might live in remote areas or
it's been a
travel
tremendous
or
benefit.
childcare or whatever.
Exactly. It's been a tremendous benefit for access to justice for those persons who now don't have to travel, don't have to have childcare, don't have to take the day off from work to attend court hearings. So the remote hearings option has been a great tool. And those of you I know who were at Legislators Day had an opportunity to see remote hearings in action. There's also, well, we have hybrid hearings, similar to what you have here, some people in person, some people remotely. So we have now much more flexibility in terms of being able to schedule either in-person hearings, and certainly some kinds of hearings, in particular jury trials, require in-person attendance, or the complete remote hearings where whether it's the lawyers or the litigants, or it could be even the judge, for example, appearing remotely, or a combination of the two. However, when the network goes down, we don't have the ability to conduct any kind of hearing. And that's what's happened when we've experienced these outages.
And how long, when it goes down, are we talking about a long time?
Well, I was going to read to you some, to try to paint a picture of what the experience has been. The most recent serious one was earlier in January, and it was basically for the day.
For the day.
For the day. And this is, if I may, just read from the countless emails that flooded when things basically shut down. This is from a criminal judge in the Chittenden County Court. Thursday was arraignment day in Costello, and I had 45 cases to work through in the morning. This requires a rapid pace and the ability to pull up dockets and documents within dockets quickly. The courtroom was full of lawyers, parties, staff, and other participants. Typically, it would have been quite busy, but manageable. Instead, dockets would not open, or after long delays watching a spinning roulette wheel, the case opened and the information appeared. But I could not move to another window, such as to open the criminal record or the proposed conditions of release, without encountering another delay of minutes, and/or was unable to return the original information and attached affidavit. Restarting the program over and over was of minimal benefit and took a valuable time while the whole courtroom full of people waited. I repeatedly apologized for the system delays, but all the judges in every courtroom were experiencing the same issues, and people reached a frustration level seldom seen. The whole exercise was exhausting and frustrating to the point I finally gave up at 11 and continued all the remaining cases to another day. That was one courtroom and one courthouse. We have 26 courthouses. That same time in the family court, you had child custody cases, parent-child custody cases, relief for abuse cases, child support cases that could not go forward. In the civil courtroom, stalking cases, landlord-tenant cases, in the probate courtroom, guardianships, in the juvenile docket, chintz cases, abuse relief cases, abused and neglected cases. People who had been waiting for months, if not years, for their hearings to take place could not take place. I mean, it was just an unbelievable experience of frustration.
I'm sure. Now, let me ask, obviously one of your proposals around the network is to move from the ADS.
Yes.
You've attempted to get a response and get some resolution and get the situation addressed by ADS, but it's not been, it hasn't been successful if you're talking about something just a couple of weeks ago.
Well, in fact, this particular day was January 6th, and we have yet to have them identified.
In history, isn't it?
Right, and it has no real significance for that, but we of course had contacted them all through, and they told us that they would let us know when the root cause has been identified. So far, the root cause for that has not been identified. We are working certainly with Denise, who's a new deputy secretary there, who acknowledges the need for improved customer service, and I think is trying very hard to try to get answers. But our concern is that there are not the answers, nor the ability, and certainly Marsha and Joe can speak much more to the technology part of it. But in terms of just the burden on the system and the inability to process the volume is what we feel has led to the issue where we're just not able to function because of it being an oversaturated system. And they can certainly explain it a lot more artfully, but we feel our proposal would allow us to be much more nimble and pattern all of the business requirements to our specific needs to enable us to react, to have 24/7, 365 customer service.
Cybersecurity. One of the things that everybody's been so concerned about is the what it takes for expertise to assure the security of the system. And,
Right.
you know, that's certainly been an area we put investments into ADS. We've got the software, we've got the monitoring at Norwich University to help. You know, there are some economies there or body of expertise. So I'm sure that's all part of what this analysis is going to be looking at and
Yes.
help us decide, or you know, if in fact this is a situation that cannot be satisfactorily addressed and you move this way, what does it take? And so I guess that probably is because what you've got now is it's not you can't tolerate, you know, it's crippling your system.
It's not sustainable. In terms of the cybersecurity, my understanding is that there would be advantages to us being able to separate out our cybersecurity needs versus being exposed to all of those which apparently state government systems are apparently continually attacked. And I don't know if Joe or Marcia would like to talk about the cybersecurity part of the proposal.
Mention center.
Yeah, so Joe Paquin for the record. One of the base concepts of cybersecurity is microsegmentation, so separating traffic that is different, and that is not currently happening on the ADS network, and being separate would give us that capability that our traffic would be separate and not at risk. And then we would have a 24/7, 365 security operations center as part of our operating budget. That is provided by an outsourced company. Somebody's going to keep an eye on our network and reach out to our technicians. So that has been definitely thought through on that part. So.
All right, so what we have here is the IT network replacement is sort of pending this independent examination.
Yes.
And Lisa, we certainly respect her assessment and making an informed decision. And then you've got your upgrade, your network cabling upgrade, and your sound system replacement, and then remote hearings improvement. So
Yes.
3 out of 4, in fact, are in the budget adjustment as it came to the House,
Yes.
plus the funding for this independent. And what was, you know what
The judiciary is going to pay for the independent
oh,
review.
you are?
Yes.
I didn't know what the estimated cost was, but
I believe it's 25,000.
oh, well, okay, in the scheme of things, it's a lot, but not a lot. All right, so 3 out of 4.
Yes, yeah.
Like
We're
2 out of 3 ain't bad. 3 out of 4 isn't bad either. But it's certainly understandable, and I know that Senator Sears, you know, you've briefed him on the situation, so I'm sure you would support the money that's the budget has. You know, the House is included in the BAA.
Yes, I would, and I think we should do everything we can to move the process forward as quickly as possible for the judiciary. But doing it right is obviously critical, and Stephanie was extremely helpful in working through all this with Terry and myself and the judiciary. So.
Yeah, Lisa, yes, Senator Lyons.
I had a question going back to the comments about segregating out from ADS. So there would be a total separation, and then you would be in charge of
Your own network.
your own network, but you're also the contracting with external services.
Yes.
Okay.
But before the decision is made to appropriate over $4 million,
Yeah.
this independent review has to occur to make recommendations that this replacement and what's being proposed is it is solid, and they would recommend moving forward in this way, or maybe they identify, I don't know what other options there might be, but maybe. So I think that's what the House was saying. We just need to have the benefit of that external independent review of this. Senator Baruch.
Just a question about the administration's position on this, and I know the judiciary is a co-equal branch and will ultimately go its own way on it with the legislature's approval of these funds, if so. But I'm wondering, is there agreement in ADS to have this happen swiftly and efficiently, or are they still of the mindset they can take care of your needs and are trying to convince you to stay?
I mentioned working with Denise, who's a newly named deputy secretary, and she, like Lisa, has been very welcoming and very receptive to discussion. We met with her, in fact, again yesterday. So she's kind of getting her feet wet as well. But we plan to proceed with the independent review, but also we indicated we're more than happy to listen to whatever ideas they might have regarding improvements. And if it is something that we worked out great, we just want to have reliable, court operations. But I guess it remains to be seen whether or not, they'd be able to offer the improvements, the same level of service that we need in the timing, because they just have so many more persons that they're needing to also assist. But she's now assigned someone to us who apparently is also new, but assigned somebody to us to connect with when there are issues such as yesterday when the network went down. Because I think she's trying very hard to, make sure that we're answering all the questions and proceeding with what's best, what has the most advantages.
But let's be clear, this was not included in the governor's proposed BAA. I think just that may be part of what, so we are gonna get the Dear Jane letter shortly regarding what the House did, and we'll see what their position is on it. So, but to be clear, this was
Right, this was
not part of the governor's proposed BA. This is a request that's coming directly to us from the judiciary. And we will, we'll see what the administration's response is to what the House included. Out of the 3 out of the 4 here. But the 4th one is really going to be within the context of the big bill.
Right, and actually, Greg will address now in terms of the governor's recommend and what we have requested in terms of the fiscal year 24 bill. But,
I hope it wasn't level funding, which is what he did for a number of areas,
I think
but
that's.
we don't need to prejudge.
Well, I'm told, I apologize because I'm just in this position since July, so I don't, but what I understand is that we typically are, if you will, level funded in terms of the governor's recommend. We get the cost of living, I think, for personnel, and typically not more than that. But Greg has the particulars on the fiscal year 24, if you would like to proceed.
Well, why don't we
to that.
finish up the BAA? Obviously, this is a big piece. This is not in the, was anything in the BAA for you?
Yes,
Okay, why
so
don't we-
the 3.
As proposed by the governor.
Oh, it's proposed by the governor now.
Okay, all right. And we know that we've got to do some cleanup language on retirement because of the judges and the bans and stuff. So I think that's been discussed with you or not.
That I'm not familiar with.
I'm not familiar with that either. Is that around retirement?
Yes, because the salaries are so clustered. and
It's a
so-
technical
It's a
correction to the
technical
to the retirement bill last year. It's from HR.
Okay, so I just wanted to alert you that there has been a request to deal with it, and it has to do with how you slide. Because the judge salaries are so compressed, and there's this middle band, and there's low, and there's high, and then it's in between what you do. So it's a technical adjustment to recognize that your salary structure is not, it's somewhat unique. So I just want to alert you that if you see something, that's what it's designed to do. And
Okay.
it's,
Well, we more than happy to respond and I guess provide whatever is
no,
documentation.
no, there's
Oh,
nothing you
okay.
need to do. We can just let you know what the, and who is the best person to,
Would be great.
Greg? Okay, well, we can do that. Yes, Senator.
I just have a process question. Does the judiciary go to the governor and make requests for their recommendations, or do you just always come to us?
No, we submitted to joint fiscal and Greg's work through the process, but we submitted by whatever the deadline was in October, what our requests were. But
Not to join fiscal to the governor's, finance and management, so Adam Gresham.
So we did submit that, but again, it's my understanding that typically we receive basically the cost of living personnel adjustments too.
That's
Like,
the
did you
big
make
bill.
these requests?
Yes,
You did make them? Yes.
yes.
Okay, and they were not included in the governor's budget adjustment.
Right.
All right, well, any other questions about what we have here and sort of the path by which it has arrived? Okay. So the request was made to the administration. The administration chose not to include them in the BA, just like that's occurred in the past year, maybe directly to us. And I think we understand the reasons behind your request. Other questions of the committee before we move on? And so you certainly talked about why you're advocating for network replacement and so forth and the cost. So unless, and which is going to be a longer term discussion. So unless there's something further on that.
I didn't know if you wanted to, just in a nutshell for the other 3
Yeah,
components.
why don't we go to the ones that the House included, and the first one would be the cabling upgrade, which you
Yes.
just slide here.
Right, and that basically announced, many of our courthouses, especially the older county courthouses, don't have the wiring necessary to accommodate the new technology. And I'm again, just kind of repeating without having any knowledge about the particulars, but there's Cat 3 wiring now. This would update it to Cat 6 wiring. That would allow it to then accommodate the new technology, in particular in our hearings, to make sure that.
And Lisa looked at all this, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So that's,
We kind of have to rely on, just like you're relying on your IT folk, we have to rely on this as well.
that's the purpose of that component. And the next component, the sound system, similarly, the courthouses, many of the older ones, especially the sound systems, are not upkeep. It's difficult to even hear. So this would be to upgrade all the sound systems so that in each courtroom we'd be able to take full advantage of this new capabilities, especially for the remote hearings, so that everybody can be heard and understood. So this would update the sound
That's
system.
a $500,000.
Yes, and then 300,000, this has to do with remote hearings, and Senator Sears is probably the most familiar with this, especially for remote arraignments at the correctional facilities where during the pandemic, a lot of the persons in custody would need to connect remotely from the correctional facilities to the courtroom for arraignments in particular. And we were, with pandemic monies, able to do some improvements at the correctional facilities so that there are screens there, there's the equipment. This would provide further improvements though, because we found through experience that they lack a soundproof area where there can be communications between the attorneys and the clients, and also to provide Wi-Fi. They don't have secure Wi-Fi. So this primarily is for those, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of.
So basically, we would be doing upgrades in the correctional facilities themselves.
Correct.
Yes.
But for remote hearings.
And this is something that has been discussed with the OC, and they would support remote hearings.
Yes, they would also, and I assume they probably have made a request for staffing to accommodate the extra staffing resources needed, I guess, you know, for example, during remote hearings for the people to do their.
Certainly save on transportation.
And I think that was the rationale in addition to the COVID concerns for the remote hearings. And also just to point out, I mentioned in other arraignments, but there are a number of persons in custody who have other cases, whether it's in civil division or family division or probate division. So this enables them to also connect for those hearings that are scheduled remotely. But you're right, and actually Judge Zone may have the best information in terms of the weighing the transportation and all the factors that go into determining when the remote hearings are best scheduled.
Be happy to address it if the committee has questions or would like me to address it.
It seems like haven't we had a long history, and there was some strong history of reservations about, doing remote hearings, but I think COVID kind of pushed us over that in terms of the potential or the benefits. So yes, if you want to just add anything here.
Well, for the record, Tom Zone, Chief Superior Judge. I would just note that I think Senator Kitchell, you're right on target, that there was, I would use the term resistance in some areas, but COVID forced our hand, if you will. And what we've been able to recognize is that there are benefits to it. They will not, remote does not always take the place of in-person. There's absolute necessity and a place for in-person. And the key going forward is to maximize use of remote hearings for reasons, including what you pointed out, transportation costs, availability of transports, and balance that with in-person. And so this will enable us to better facilitate those types of hearings.
I can't imagine anything more frustrating than transporting someone, on an hour transport to a courthouse where the network is down and you're sitting there for hours. So it's sort of one of those domino situations. So that would be the improvements in the correctional facilities.
And part of the objection also, in honesty, initially to the remote hearings was there wasn't the technology available to have realistic and I guess meaningful remote hearings. So again, a silver lining, the pandemic monies allowed us to make improvements to at least improve the base for the quality of the remote hearings, and this will hopefully further enhance the idea of that experience.
There seems like a lot of benefits. But you can make these improvements based on actual experience, like that's what you're coming in. Other questions about what's in the BAA? Okay. Then we do have the ups and downs here and the 24 budget overview.
Great,
Um,
and Greg will.
You're gonna relinquish your seat.
Excuse me, thank you very much.
Should we work through this document, Greg, or
Sure, I'm
want the
gonna,
ups and downs, or both?
whatever your preference is, if you like slides or memos or spreadsheets.
Well, why don't we do the slides?
They should all be in the same order.
Okay.
So I'll go through some of the budget pressures for the judiciary. For the record, my name is Greg Mosley, Chief of Finance and Administration for Vermont Judiciary. Thank you, committee, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to talk through some of the budgetary issues that we're facing this year. The biggest upward pressure, of course, is the annualization of the Pay Act. That was recommended, that was in the governor's recommend. $3.3 million. That includes, of course, the cost board increase, step increases. It does also include, there was a pay grade adjustment for our docket clerks. The changes in the court system with the new computer system and all the e-filing, along with remote hearings, has made that job much more complex. So we worked with the VACA, and that cost is included in was in the governor's recommend. The other big upward pressure is the increase in the internal service funds, and that's also a statewide pressure, probably something you'll see plenty of as the different departments come through here. Those are the two statewide pressures, and they were both in the governor's recommend. The other programmatic pressures were not recommended, and they're not in the governor's recommend. So I thought I would go through some of those. We're asking for the reinstatement of the FY20 base budget. We cut $500,000 from our vacancy savings line. This was something that happened across the board right at the height of the beginning of the pandemic. We all thought the tax revenues were going to plummet. We made this cut, and it has stretched us in our vacancy savings line tremendously. We now are forced to budget $1.4 million in vacancy savings, which is, the savings you get when there's turnover.
So what rate would that, I mean, there's a normal vacancy rate of around 5%. So would we get it up to 8 or something like that, or?
Well, we've operated before with about 950,000 vacancy savings. This pushes us to 1.4 million. And at this point of the year, we're 7 months into the fiscal year, we're not on target to hit that number. We're going to come in under and be in the red on our vacancy savings. Now, that may change over the last 5 months of the fiscal year. The other increases that are more programmatic are increases in staffing. And so this gets to our backlog from the pandemic, and even pre-pandemic, there was a backlog.
So this first chart is what's in the governor's.
Yes.
Okay. And then the next is the pressures that you've identified that are not.
Yeah, the one pressure on that slide that was in the governor's recommend is 400,000 for the sheriff's increase. I thought I would address that towards the end.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Court security, again. Senator Sears, huh? You gonna have a reaction?
Well, I'm gonna hold all reactions till I meet with the judiciary over the budget.
Okay. All right.
I'm happy to go there now.
No. We'll let it know on Friday afternoon.
But my first reaction is, it's too cold to get too upset, but I would have been surprised if we didn't have a security issue.
Okay, I guess I'm in the same boat. So, so the governor did include 400,000 toward security contracts. But that's not the full funding, then you believe?
No, on the last slide, there's a chart that shows you a little bit more.
It says 300 above the governor's recommend.
Yeah, so the governor's recommend, currently, we pay the sheriffs $45 an hour. And that's not what the deputies get paid, that's what the sheriffs get paid through this contract. And the governor's recommend adds 400,000 that would bring the hourly rate to $47.50 per hour per deputy. The sheriffs are asking for $51 an hour.
Yeah,
which-
that's on your second slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the judiciary in this case, we're kind of in the middle here between the sheriffs and the state. So it is a little bit of a financial pass-through. Our goal is to try and get security to a point where we don't lose deputies, and we're not there yet, unfortunately. Last year, there was that significant appropriation, got us up to $45 an hour. We still lost deputies. We still don't have a contract in Grand Isle. And the sheriffs in Orange, Windsor, and Bennington counties all decreased the support for courts.
Well,
So,
because they're losing their, yeah, it's not wanting to provide it, they haven't got the officers.
yeah, that's correct. Bennington has been a significant pain point because they're one of the counties where we have the most number of sheriffs. They have, I think it's more than 6 deputies working the court systems. They have 2 courts in Bennington. We're down to about 2. And so what we've done is we've asked the nearby sheriffs, and in this case, Wyndham County is bringing the sheriff over the mountains to help us in one of the courts. And then we used the pandemic funding to hire limited service employees to work court security. And so we have either 3 or 4 of them really assigned to Bennington at the moment.
Actually, that was my question. And Senator Sears, I don't know if you can help out with this, but my memory was last year we did provide staff positions to the judiciary. Am I remembering that incorrectly?
For security, what we did was we said that people who were state paid deputies for transport, if they weren't transporting, they could do security. And since we're already paying for that state paid deputy, my question to Greg is that do we pay an hourly rate for them too, which is double paying the sheriff?
And is that why you have your hand up, Senator?
Yes,
Sears?
yeah.
Okay.
So
And you may not be able to answer that at this point, but certainly as we delve into the budget, I'd really like to get an answer to that.
Make sure we're not.
'Cause, yeah, I'm worried that if we're paying 51 and we have a state paid deputy, we're already paying. They were double paying for them. And I still think one contract with the sheriff or whomever you want to contract with would be the best way to go.
I can speak to that. We are definitely not double paying sheriff state paid deputies. I assure you of that. We work with this state attorney's and sheriff's office, Andy Noonan and I, and we do use state paid deputies in courthouses for some activities. We can't rely on them to do like front door screening or court officer because their primary goal is to transport. So they could get called away, and then that leaves the court in short hand. So, but we do use them. In particular, the Chittenden County state paid deputies are supporting Grand Isle Courthouse. And in a number of other counties, when they're not transporting, the state paid deputies do go to the courthouse and offer supplementary support.
My other question is do you have a new relationship with the Wyndham County Sheriff? Because last I knew, the sheriff's deputies weren't providing security at the Wyndham County courthouses, but now they're sending somebody over to Bennington?
Yeah, actually, we have a new.
That's a little strange.
Well, that's Mark, right? Mark,
It's
yeah.
Mark Anderson, the sheriff there, and we've been using private security in the Wyndham courthouses for many years since the old sheriff stepped away from his contract. And we still use private security, but we've added a sheriff deputy as a rover for the Brattleboro criminal courthouse. And in addition to that, he is temporarily offering an officer who lives, I guess, on the western side of his county to go over to Bennington. And we're working with the new Bennington sheriff to try and get the commitments to get back up to the old level. So yeah, we do have a new contract with Wyndham that just started last fall.
Okay. Well,
Did I answer your question, Senator Sears?
I guess it's just kind of strange. We use private security. You can send one to Bennington.
We use a patchwork of security in all of our courthouses, unfortunately. So we use some employees, we use private security, we use sheriff deputies, sometimes deputies from different counties. And they all could be in the same building, unfortunately. The Berry Courthouse is probably the best example. We have 2 Orange County sheriff deputies in there. We have 2
Are
security
there any left?
from Orange County.
Yes.
Well, there was supposed to be 3, there's currently 2. Sometimes the sheriffs also have to provide somebody who's not completed the police academy training or is not level 2 certified. We do accept that in certain situations in those larger courthouses where that person can be teamed up with a level 2 certified officer. But I can tell you, going back to the pay issue, the state paid deputies get paid, I think it's about $47 an hour. And their timesheets go to the state's attorney's office and they're paid from their budget. So when they're in the courthouses, that timesheet is going to the state's attorneys and then they will bill us and we'll do a transfer.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll keep moving then. So, you're asking for the reinstatement that, the base that you said you gave up back when we thought, revenues were coming in, lower. Then you have,
Yeah.
you would like 1 judge and 1 law clerk.
Yeah, and if we could, we'd like to speak to the staffing requests for a moment. And I don't know, Judge Shonda, if you want to join in on this, but we are asking for another judge and another law clerk to support the court's activities to dig through this backlog of cases.
Would that be a retired judge?
So,
So this would be another position. So
I see.
so it's more than the backlog then. What, I guess the heart of your question is once you get, I guess if we count down to Nirvana here, you got the backlog taken care of, would the just normal workload require that additional staffing? I think, is that sort of what you were?
I was just wondering, because I knew they had retired judges helping out with the backlog, so.
You want to respond?
Sure, I could address that. Where we are right now is out of our 36 judge positions for Superior Court, we have 33 judges. We have 3 who have retired. The governor currently has names to make appointments. We also have 1 more who is retiring in April. And like many agencies and parts of the state government, we are going to have some more retirements in the next few years. That's just natural. We also have a significant backlog. And what we've been doing to try to address the backlog is utilizing retired judges to help out. We were using retired judges to assist us before we had the openings we have now. And so we are basically trying to not only fill these empty positions with retired judges, but get additional footing for backlog. When you look at where our judges are geographically located, Senator Sears' corner of the state, we don't have enough judges down in the Rutland-Bennington area. And so we have to bring judges in from outside of those areas to come into there. And so if the legislature were to approve another judge, well, when we do the vacancy announcement, that would go out for being a judge who would be primarily in Bennington and Rutland counties on the West region. The use of that judge is not just for backlogs, because we had backlogs before the pandemic. It would be to keep case flow moving in the future. And also, it frees judges up. We have backlogs in all of our courts. We have areas where we might need cases to be heard at a specific time that we don't have judicial resources in that county to address. And we, by having a float position or having judges be able to move, are able to address the pressing needs that we have in different counties. It basically is the chief superior judge saying, oh, we don't have a judge there that day because of illness or vacation or whatever it may be. We have the ability to fill. When we don't have the extra judges to be able to even fit into the counties like Bennington or Rutland, we certainly don't have the judges to be able to fill gaps. In the Northeast Kingdom, we had, for instance, Judge Devine, who was doing a float between Orleans and Caledonia and Essex for juvenile and relief from abuse cases. He retired. We're bringing up a judge from Wyndham. Judge Tom Devine, as young as he was, decided to retire at the end of the year.
That doesn't seem right.
That's
Well,
what I
and
tried
of
to
course,
tell him.
we have Judge Manley retire, we had Judge Morris retire, I mean, we've got Judge Banner retire, I see them all. Hey, I need to recruit them to come back to work.
And they are, Judge Bent has been Without him, I can't tell you what we would have done in the kingdom. He has been a wonderful assistance. But we're bringing up a judge from Wyndham County 2 days a week. We're bringing in Judge Rainville from Chittenden County 2 days a week. And so we need the extra judicial help. And in addition to the judge, we also put in for a law clerk. And the law clerk is someone who works with judges. We currently have 16 law clerks for 36 judges, 14 probate judges, and 6 magistrates and hearing officers. By comparison, I know that some jurisdictions have 1 for 1. Every judge gets his or her own law clerk. Across the river in New Hampshire, I believe that's the case. But if we had 1 more, that would enable the judges to have the additional.
Legislature per judge in New Hampshire. Over 400. All right, so your request is an additional judge and 1 law clerk, and then new staff clerk positions. And those would be in a range of positions.
Yeah, so
Support the court work.
there's 11 positions, and the vast majority would be judicial assistants, what were the old docket clerks. And you know, as I already mentioned, the work is very complex, and
But you said I'm sorry, you said they would be the old docket clerks?
so the job title used to be docket clerks. It's now judicial assistants.
Yeah,
So I just wanted to,
because those were the positions that got upgraded.
yes, they're now called judicial assistants. And we've received a fair amount of pandemic funding, and what we did with that is we hired around 50 limited service positions to help us with the backlog. What we're learning though is this backlog, the changes in our system, our Odyssey system, and the remote hearings will make permanent changes to the way the courts operate. And so what we'd like to do is, as those limited service positions end, because it's funded right now, one-time funding, that we will need an increase in staff positions in order to continue to.
So this in essence is backfilling for on an ongoing basis, those limited service
To make
positions.
permanent some increases in staff, yes.
So you have 50 now, and what you're saying is because of the pandemic funding, but on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I think Terry. would like to
Yeah.
add.
Because there are kind of new realities in terms of the clerk work, if you will. And I'm going to mention, and I know we're not unique in government, but I feel that the courts have been understaffed for years. I worked in a court management, regional court management capacity for Rutland, Addison, and Bennington counties at the time of the restructuring in 2010 to about 2016. And I can certainly attest for how underwater typically court staff were in terms of trying to keep up with the load. And
How do you get anyone to want to be a judge in light of this testimony?
you know, Madam Chair, honestly, it's pure public service. And I mean, it's a
Well,
thankless
that we can
task.
understand.
I know you can relate to that. It's exactly that. And actually, a lot of the judicial assistants, it's the same thing. They could earn more money, but they're making a contribution to their community.
I know
and
in
they
some
really-
high-powered law firms, and I have great appreciation for the work and the difficulty, particularly family court. It's so tough, but, okay, well, I understand what you're doing is saying we had this infusion of staff, but we realize that that's an ongoing need for those resources. But instead of 50, you're asking for 11.
Right, and actually what we're looking at is increased also workload because of the remote hearings, for example. We didn't have the remote hearings, but it takes people to make the connections, to run the equipment, to do that aspect of it that we didn't have before. And it's not something we want to do away with because it has such great advantages, especially access to justice advantages. Another component of it is expungements. I mean, we agree with the policy, but the expungement process, believe it or not, is a 39-step process, very labor intensive. We have right now 5 court staff working only on expungements, not court operations work that they were doing previously. So that's another kind of an added stressor, if you will, that we didn't have before. And the other thing is, and I hate to bring this up, but with the new e-filing and case management system, again, many efficiencies, and thank God we had it because we wouldn't have been able to connect remotely to our files when we had to go remote, but for the electronic filing. But there are more prompts, many more prompts and waiting for things to download, so things take longer, even though it's a new technology system. I think Senator McCormick, when he did Legislative Day in Windsor County, said what used to take him, 10 minutes to do his student evaluations now takes 45 with the new technology. So that's just been a reality that we've learned is something that's.
You might not be the best barometer. It'd be like asking me.
Yes, that's a progress.
It looks like, in fact, what we've done is go into the other slides, and that is your background in terms of the judge, law clerk, and the additional positions.
Yes.
So,
We tried to keep everything in order, so if we jump to a different document.
well, we don't stay to the script, don't you know?
You know that, yeah.
Okay, other questions, and then, of course, the big one is the modernization of the IT network. Yes, and
On the sheriff slide, the second bullet point, I didn't understand that the last year's increase to 45 reduced security in fiscal year 23.
So we tried to maintain the number of deputy sheriffs that we had under contract, but as I mentioned, some counties decreased their support. So Grand Isle still doesn't have a contract with us.
It wasn't because you raised the rate to 45.
It wasn't significant enough to allow them to recruit and replace some of their deputies. So in Wyndham County, there was 3 deputies. They were at one point down to 1. We were trying to backfill limited service staff.
But it could have been worse had you not reached to raise it to 45.
I'm sure it would have been worse.
other questions? And then, of course, this is just the budget, the governor's proposed budget.
Yes, that's the ups and downs of from what the government proposed. If you're going from the memo, there's a last little point that's not in the slides around our tech fund, our court technology fund. It's a special fund. We did request that some fees get increased in order to increase the revenue that goes into that fund. They were submitted with our budget request. They didn't go anywhere. There's no fee bill at the moment.
I know, but the House is interested in a fee bill, and I believe the Sherry and the Secretary of State's office were providing information, so I was.
Yeah, we're working with
assuming
JFO, and I believe we'll be talking to House Ways and Means Committee. But I just wanted to mention that there's an issue out there as well.
Well, we know the fees haven't been updated, and it does add even more budget pressure.
Yeah, the pressure to us is it goes, some of those fees go into our court technology fund, and that fund is to support judicial IT. Well, our IT footprint obviously is growing at the time when the revenues are.
We're not adverse to having a fee bill this year.
Well, the only question is what for me is the failure to pay fee. You're increasing that on people that fail to pay.
That's doubling it, 30 to 60.
Yeah, why would you pick that fee to increase? I mean, there's lots of fees, but sign of failure to pay, does that mean they're going to pay now if it's a higher fee?
Oh, twice as much.
I totally understand the concern with doubling these late fees. The problem is that this revenue needs to be addressed in some way. Whether it gets addressed with a fee increase or in some other way, it really doesn't matter to the judiciary.
You're agnostic on the source of the money, you just want the money.
We just need to support the IT. And
Yeah.
we're not there at the moment.
Yeah, that's a fairly significant increase, double. Okay, anything else, Senator Sears, that we haven't covered from?
No, I look forward to meeting with the team at Judiciary and seeing what we can come up with for the FY24 budget.
Okay. All right. Anything else that we haven't asked you or you'd like to share? Or,
We're of course right next door, so if
and
you have
what
any
questions
questions,
did we
let us
ask
know.
that you really don't want us to ask?
I feel like we've covered everything that you at least thought was, would be relevant. We really appreciate your taking the time to listen, and especially to do the Budget Adjustment Act and the budget. That was nice to be able to see the big picture.
Well, we're also finding it kind of efficient rather than, having to come back again and look at how much schedule you had to coordinate to come here today. So not at work for, and on a Friday afternoon, on a very cold Friday afternoon.
You have heat, it's okay.
Yeah.
We're happy to be here.
Do you have to travel far? You live
I'm Heartland. I know Terry is Rutland.
Wow. Well, I think at this point, we've covered our testimony, so I am going to suggest that we adjourn the committee